When I was 10, I sat in for my grandfather at the coffin shop. Just after noon, a blind old man passed by. He sniffed in front of the shop, and, his voice hoarse, said to me, "Sammy, it's going to rain later. If anyone tells you to lie down in a coffin, whatever you do, don't do it." I glanced at the sky. It was clear and bright, not the least sign of rain. It wasn't long before Grandpa came back. He was soaked through. The moment he stepped in, he grabbed my wrist, so hard his nails nearly bit into my skin. "Hurry, it's going to rain. Sammy, get into the coffin right now." I was yanked and staggered, instinctively looking up at the sky. The sky that had been cloudless moments before was now pitch dark. A muffled thunder rolled in from afar and made my chest flutter with unease. "Grandpa, isn't this coffin for Uncle? If I lie in it, that's unlucky." I recoiled, trying to pull my hand free. Uncle was the village's old bachelor. He died of illness a few days ago, and this coffin was something my grandfather had specially hurried to make. He planned to deliver it tonight. But Grandpa paid me no mind. He slammed the shop door shut, grabbed me, and dragged me toward the coffin, muttering over and over, "Hurry, there's no time." A chill ran through me. Grandpa was usually so strict about taboos. There was no way he would let me lie in a coffin meant for the dead. I tried to wrench myself free again, but couldn't shake him off. Just as I was starting to panic, a gust of wind came tearing through, and with a clang the shop door was blown open. Rain blew in. This rain was wicked. Not a soft drizzle, but drop after heavy drop, striking the ground as if each had its own weight, and quickly pooling into a puddle by the doorway. My grandfather cursed, let go of my hand, and turned to shut the door. I took the opportunity to duck down and wriggled under the coffin. In our village, a coffin must not touch the ground before it's finished and delivered to the deceased home. So Uncle's coffin had been propped up on low wooden slats at the bottom, leaving just enough room for me to lie flat underneath. It was pitch dark below. I held my breath and peered out through a crack. After he had closed the shop door and didn't find me, he began pacing through the store, searching for me. As he searched, he kept coaxing me. "Sammy, where are you hiding? Come out now. This rain's got bad energy. It draws in filth. Hiding in the coffin will preserve some of your young. When the rain stops, I'll let you out." I bit my lip hard, not daring to make sound, because from under the coffin I could just see my grandfather's pair of feet. He was wearing his usual dark blue cloth shoes, the soles still caked with mud. But those cloth shoes, when he walked, were suspended in midair. Half an inch above the ground, it drifted through the shop. I felt a chill all over, my head buzzing. My grandfather's feet. How could they be floating in midair? As I stood in horror, I watched those feet circle the shop. Not noticing me, they slowly moved off into the distance. It stood in the doorway, as if trying to push the door open. I let out a small, relieved breath. It seemed my grandfather thought I had gone out. Taking a deep breath, I carefully poked my head out from under the coffin, planning to wait for the right moment and slip away. But no sooner had I exposed half my head than my whole body froze. I saw my grandfather standing at the coffin shop's doorway with his body turned away from me, but his head had twisted a full 180 degrees to face me. It turned out that earlier I had only seen my grandfather's feet walking away. I didn't realize that his face had been fixed on me the whole time, unblinking. When he saw me peek out, a strange smile spread across his face, and he said, "Sammy, finally found you." My grandfather walked toward me like that, backing up with his back to me. As he drew near, his two arms slowly swung back, as if reaching out from behind, stretching straight toward me to grab. My whole body froze, my calves trembling. I tried to stand, but couldn't summon any strength, just as my grandfather's pale, bluish hands were about to seize my throat. Bang, bang, bang. 3 loud knocks in succession, like thunder smashing against the door. The coffin shop's gate was thrust open. Cold rain, stained with the smell of earth, poured in. Standing in the doorway was the blind old man from before. His wrist flicked, and the copper coins in his hand shot like projectiles toward my grandfather. A plume of black smoke rose from the place where the copper coins had struck my grandfather. A shrill howl forced its way out of his throat as he staggered backward. "Sammy, come with me," the old blind man shouted, and my body, which had been trembling with fear, suddenly found some strength. I dodged my stumbling grandfather, straightened up, and bolted for the front gate. No sooner had I rushed out of the shop than I stepped into a puddle outside. The water was bone-chilling cold, making me shiver involuntarily. Worse, when I looked down. Where the raindrops hit the puddle, ripples spread, and a ghastly white face emerged, only the size of a palm, its mouth opening and closing as if trying to bite my foot. I screamed, kicked desperately, but the face wound around me like waterweed, tightening with every twist. The blind old man heard me, turned his head and shouted, "Close your eyes." Then he dug into his coat pocket, pulled out a handful of glutinous rice, tossed it up, and the rice scattered down over the puddle. The face of the person struck by the glutinous rice instantly contorted, issuing a baby-like wail, then turned into black smoke and dissipated. I hurriedly thanked the blind old man. He nodded, motioning for me to follow him forward. I asked him, "Where are we going?" The blind old man said, "To the earth temple at the west end of the village. There's a consecrated earth deity statue there. Malevolent things cannot enter." I nodded, remembering my grandfather's strange behavior in the coffin shop a moment ago. As I walked, I asked the old blind man, "Old blind man, what happened to my grandfather?" The old blind man said, "That wasn't your grandfather. That was the death substitute that came to claim your life. I warned you earlier because I foresaw you'd suffer a bloody calamity today. I just didn't expect it to come so quickly or be so wicked." We hurried along and soon arrived at the Earth Temple. It was the oldest building in the village, with green bricks and gray tiles. The plaque hanging above the entrance had long since faded. I saw a dim yellow light inside the temple, seeping through the crack in the door. In this rain that seemed to blot out the sky, it felt especially reassuring to me. The blind old man took 2 or 3 strides forward and shoved the door open. I hurried in right behind him. But the moment I saw the scene inside the Earth God shrine, I froze. In the center of the shrine stood the statue of the Earth God, and beside the statue, to my shock, a person was tied up. The man was bound tightly with hemp rope, a sack thrown over his head, still struggling. But what surprised me was the man's build and clothing. They were exactly the same as my grandfather's. "Grandpa?" A possibility flashed through my mind. I shouted as I ran over, hastily fumbling to tear off the burlap sack. Sure enough, beneath the sack my grandfather's pale face was revealed. I reached for the hair at the back of his head. It was still seeping blood. When my grandpa looked up and saw me, he made urgent whimpering sounds. I quickly pulled the wad of cloth out of his mouth. He spat a mouthful of bloody foam, his voice hoarse as he asked me, "Sammy, what are you doing here?" Then he noticed a blind old man standing beside me and asked, "Who is this?" I explained that it was thanks to the blind old man that I was saved. While I was waiting for you at the coffin shop, a man who looked exactly like you came into the shop. He insisted on making me lie down inside the coffin. If the blind old man hadn't shown up, I dare say I would be dead by now. My grandfather fell silent for a long moment after hearing this, first thanking the blind old man, then saying to me, "When I was on my way back to the shop just now, I got hit in the back of the head, and when I opened my eyes, I was here." My grandfather glanced at the rain that continued unabated outside the temple and sighed. "This rain is wicked, full of cold, sinister chi. If I'm not mistaken, you ran into a ghost just now. Lucky you're unharmed. I don't think this rain will stop anytime soon. Stay the night here in the Earth Temple. We'll deal with it in the morning." As he spoke, my grandfather pointed to the back of the Earth God statue. "There's a little shed back there. Sammy, you tuck yourself inside. This old man and I will keep watch outside." I followed the direction my grandfather was pointing. Behind the Earth God statue, there really was a low little doorway, narrow enough that only one person could pass through sideways. Inside it was pitch dark, and I could just make out a space only half a person high. I had been to this Earth Temple before, but I'd never noticed there was a small room behind the statue. I walked toward that little room, and just as I bent down, intending to crawl in, for some reason, I suddenly pictured myself once inside, lying there. This cramped, low space didn't feel like a room, it felt like a coffin. A cold chill ran down my spine. I recalled the stand-in corpse from the coffin shop earlier, always trying to trick me into lying in the coffin. My scalp tingled. I stepped back to my grandfather's side and said to him, "Grandpa, maybe I'll wait outside. That room is too dark. I'm a little scared." I didn't expect Grandpa to hear me, and suddenly his face went dark. He called me by my full name and demanded, "Sammy, are you not listening to your grandpa anymore?" I trembled all over. Immediately, I felt that the grandpa in front of me was wrong. My grandpa never calls me by my full name, because he said I was born with a fragile life and needed a humble name to keep me safe. So he always called me Sammy so I could live smoothly. So my full name has always been taboo. But why would he suddenly shout at me like that now? My heart hammered. I remembered earlier in the coffin shop that scapegoat looked exactly like my grandfather. Could the man in front of me, my grandpa, also be a ghost? Thinking that, I kept glancing over at the blind old man beside us. But the blind old man was blind. He couldn't see my signals at all and sat there calmly, as ever. I had no choice but to try another approach. First test the man in front of me. I put on a look of compliance and told my grandfather, "All right, I'll go in later." With the corner of my eye, I cautiously scanned the little earth temple. I noticed that the incense burner in front of the Tutagong statue was piled high with thick ash. I remember my grandfather saying that ghosts hate incense above all. Touch it, and they'll show their true form. So I pretended I needed to help my grandpa up to find him a more comfortable place to lean against, and then I went back inside. Taking advantage of his lower guard, my hand quietly slid toward the censer. With a sudden grab at the ash, I flung it into my grandfather's face. The moment the incense ash stuck to his face, a black smoke billowed up. My grandfather's skin and flesh melted like wax, revealing a terrifying face. Half of his melted eyeball was exposed. He turned once and stared at me. "Sammy, why won't you listen to Grandpa? Wouldn't it be better to go inside and lie down?" He really was that body double for death. He even chased me into the Earth Temple. He'd already disguised himself as my grandfather, almost fooling both me and the blind old man. The death double's hideous, terrifying appearance made me break out in a cold sweat I couldn't control. I turned to look toward the blind old man, just about to call for his help. But when I looked closely, there was no blind old man there at all. In the empty Earth Temple, it was just me and the substitute corpse. A tremendous shock hit my heart. I watched helplessly as the substitute corpse sneered and edged closer to me, inch by inch. Just as I helplessly closed my eyes, ready to die, I heard the old blind man roar, "Sammy, what are you closing your eyes for? Run." Something whooshed past my ear. When I opened my eyes again, I saw several copper coins strike the sacrificial stand-ins. But this time, it didn't injure the scapegoat much. Instead, it utterly enraged him. "You blind bastard, you just had to get in my way." With that, the scapegoat turned and lunged at the old blind man, and they became entangled in a struggle. I couldn't afford to think much. In 3 strides I hurried, taking advantage of their scuffle to dash out of the Earth Temple. Just as I stepped over the threshold, my vision flickered. I clutched my slightly dizzy head and looked back again. This time, I finally saw clearly that what stood behind me was by no means a roadside shrine. It was a desolate, vacant lot, overgrown with weeds. Among those weeds stood a small grave mound. What surprised me most was that beside the mound there was an open-top coffin. It was the very coffin my grandfather had made for Uncle in the coffin shop. A chill of dread washed over me. Thinking back to that little hut where the substitute corpse had told me to lie down, if I had actually gone in, I'd have lain straight into the coffin. My mind still racing. The blind old man also stepped out of the grave mound shadow. He turned and noticed the coffin as well, letting out a sigh. This ghostly thing is no amateur at all. It even got to me. It seems this rain will only deepen its resentment. If it's delayed any longer, I'm afraid even I will have trouble dealing with it. I stared at the blind old man without replying, a twinge of doubt forming in my chest. Every time, this blind old man manages to appear just when I'm about to be attacked by a substitute victim, and only then steps in to help me. If the coffin shop incident was an accident, what about just now in the Earth God's temple? That body double was clearly right beside him. Could he really not see through his sleight of hand? Or was it that he was in league with the substitute all along? Everything just a ruse to gain my trust. But if that were the case, why had he insisted on saving me in the first place? I was baffled, so I decided to confront the blind old man directly. The blind old man, I don't know you at all. Why must you help me? The blind old man was soaked through by the rain. He wiped his face and sighed. Sammy, it's not surprising you don't recognize me, but I know your granddad. Do you really think your granddad was just an ordinary coffin maker? When he was young, he was a big figure in our world. The blind old man's words astonished me beyond measure. My grandpa had always been unbearably reclusive. Apart from selling coffins, he rarely mingled with anyone in the village. In my memory, he was a taciturn, somewhat wooden man. For my grandpa to be like that. And yet, could he, like the blind old man, practice Taoist arts? But if my grandfather had such abilities, why hide them from me all these years? Why never show any of his specialness? The blind old man didn't know the turmoil in my heart. He went on saying, the rain's getting heavier and heavier. If we really find the Earth Temple now, it won't be safe to stay inside. Come on, let's go to your place. If I had to pick the safest spot in the whole village right now, it would definitely be your home. He said that and beckoned me to follow him forward. I didn't dare stay where I was, so I hurried after him. The rain grew heavier and heavier, pouring down as if from buckets, pelting so hard that it was impossible to keep your eyes open. The old blind man strode quickly ahead. His figure was blurred, and I had to squint hard just to barely keep up. Sammy, Sammy. In the wind and rain, someone faintly called my name. It sounded like my grandfather. I gave a jolt, twisted my head toward the voice, and saw a figure standing in the distant curtain of rain. I wanted to call out to the blind old man, but he kept walking on, occasionally taking glutinous rice from his pocket and sprinkling it into the puddles on the ground, completely unable to hear me. When I looked back toward the shadow again, I turned my head and found that the silhouette had already come up right in front of me. He said, "Don't trust that blind man. He's trying to harm you." The figure before me was exactly like my grandfather, his tone of voice, the way he frowned. But looking more closely, the raindrops passed right through his body and fell to the ground. He was a wisp of a soul. I felt both fear and a sting in my nose. For some reason, I instinctively felt that the soul before me was truly my grandfather's. But if I could see my grandfather's spirit, wouldn't that mean, "Grandpa, are you really dead?" As soon as the words left my mouth, it felt like my throat was packed with cotton. My grandfather's expression changed, and finally he sighed. When we were bringing him back to the coffin shop, this rain shouldn't fall on the living, it shouldn't. My grandfather's words slipped out, as if he suddenly realized he had said the wrong thing. His hand, half hidden, reached out, and, as he usually did, ruffled my hair. He said, "Sammy, when I'm not around, you must take care of yourself. Remember, the rain itself isn't scary, it won't hurt you. What will hurt you are the things in this rain. Don't trust anyone." I asked, "Grandpa, will I be able to see you again?" My grandpa smiled. His figure in the rain grew even fainter. He said, "As long as Sammy wants to see me, you certainly will." When he finished speaking, the image and voice of my grandfather drifted farther and farther away. I shouted at him, crying and begging him not to go, to come back quickly. The blind old man heard my commotion then. He turned around, his damp face marked by alertness. "Sammy, did you see something?" What my grandfather's spirit had just said made me trust the blind old man less, and I hesitated before telling a lie. "It's nothing." The blind old man stared at me for a long moment, then said meaningfully, "Sammy, this rain is strange. Some things love to prey on people's fears and deceive them. The more afraid you are of something, the more you'll see of it. Hurry along, it's not far from your home. Once you're there, you'll be fine." I followed the blind old man back to my house. When we reached the courtyard gate, I found our main door wide open and the main room brightly lit. A sliver of hope stirred in me. Could it be that my grandfather was still at home? But when I stepped into the courtyard and pushed open the main house's door, there was no one inside. The teacup still sat on the wooden table, but the chair was empty. Even though I knew in my heart that I might never see my grandfather again, I still felt a pang of sorrow. The blind old man entered the yard, standing in the rain and looking around. Despite the heavy rain, he didn't seem inclined to come inside and join me in the main house to take shelter. I found it odd, but then suddenly remembered my grandpa had once said the threshold of our main house was made from peachwood struck by lightning, with copper coins and cinnabar pressed beneath it. Shallow, low-level spirits wouldn't dare to cross it. I squinted at the blind old man. Could it be that he, too, was a ghost? At that moment, the old blind man twitched his nose several times, as if he had smelled something. I saw him standing in front of the left-hand room, the room I usually sleep in. The blind man pointed at the left room and asked me, "Sammy, is this the room you usually sleep in?" Alarm bells rang in my mind. My grandfather had warned me 1,000 times, told me over and over that I had two taboos. One was that I must never be called by my full name. The other was that I must never tell outsiders which room I slept in. Because of this, my grandfather had even set up a fake room on the right side, inside which he placed a bed with bedding laid out. I pointed toward the room on the right and told the blind old man, "No, it's that room on the right." The old blind man hesitated, staring at me for a moment. His unfocused eyes seemed, somehow, to actually see me. His gaze made the hairs on my arms stand up. He said, "Sammy, are you really sleeping in the room on the right?" "Yeah, the right one," I said, clenching my fist until my nails bit into my palm. The old blind man sighed. The sound mixed with the rain and, to my ears, was especially helpless. "If you don't tell the truth, then I can't save you either." I pressed my lips together and stayed silent. He summoned me out of the main house and had me stand beside him to look at the two side rooms flanking it, asking me what they resembled. I had long known that the layout of our house was different from most homes in the village, but I never gave it much thought. After what happened today, how that scapegoat kept trying to trick me into the coffin, when I looked again at those two side rooms, I saw them differently. No windows, entirely black all over. No matter how you looked at it, they both resembled two enormous coffins. My legs went weak, and I almost sat down on the ground. You noticed? Although the old man was blind, his eyes seemed to pierce straight through to my heart. "How many years have you been sleeping in this room?" "You, a living person, sleeping in a house brimming with such oppressive energy. Do you really think your grandfather did it for your own good?" The blind man's words made my head ring, but my mouth was still making excuses for my grandfather. How could my grandpa hurt me? Maybe it was just a coincidence. The old blind man shook his head and sighed. "Though I don't know why your grandfather would do such a thing, a man so versed in feng shui could not possibly be unaware that a living person cannot sleep in that room, unless he simply doesn't want you to live. Sammy, the moment I saw you, I could tell you're wrapped in energy. You weren't meant to live long. I thought it was just bad fate, but now I understand it's this house's layout that's harming you." I took step after step backward, covering my ears, not wanting to hear the blind old man's words. I don't believe my grandfather would harm me. He is the person who has been best to me in this world. How could my grandfather possibly want me dead? The blind old man leaned toward me and asked me to raise my hand to show him my wrist. He said, "If you still don't believe me, I bet there's a thin bluish-black line on the inside of your wrist, running straight up to your shoulder." A chill ran through me. How could the blind old man possibly know these things? I'd never met him before, and my arm had been snugly covered by my sleeve the whole time. There was no way he could have seen. He stared at me and continued, "That's the sign of energy seeping into the bones. If you let it go on much longer, I'm afraid you won't survive." I stood there, dazed and motionless. Not long after, tears the size of beans slid down my cheeks and wouldn't stop. My composure completely collapsed. I cried out to the blind old man, "Is my grandfather really trying to kill me? Blind old man, is there still hope for me? Please save me." The blind old man sighed deeply and looked up at the sky. "It's sin, all sin." He pointed again toward the side room on the left and asked me, "Sammy, this is the house you sleep in, right?" This time I didn't hide it. I nodded directly and said yes. The blind old man hummed, then said to me, "You go into that room, under the bed you sleep in, there must be a yellow talisman paper. The talisman paper has your birth date and 8 characters. Tear the paper off and put it inside this. Everything else we'll talk about after you come out." As he spoke, the blind old man took out a gourd from his arms. I took the gourd. It felt unexpectedly cold in my hand. But I didn't think much of it. Clutching the gourd, I headed to the room on the right. All the way there, I kept wondering, could it be that everything my grandpa has done for me over the years was a lie? He had hidden so much from me, so much that I never even knew about his younger days. I felt like I was losing my grip on who my grandpa really was. One thing after another had happened today, and the person who was once closest to me had suddenly become a complete stranger. I pushed open the door and entered the room as I always did. The room had no windows all year round. It was stifling and dark. I lit the small lamp placed in the southeast corner of the room, which finally made the space a bit brighter. I walked straight over to the bed. Come to think of it, in all these years, I've never made the bed myself even once, and my grandfather wouldn't allow me to clean the room. All the arrangements in the room were done by him. I never doubted his intentions. I only felt that my grandfather treated me with extraordinary kindness. Looking back now, it was probably because he was afraid I would discover the oddities in the room. I crouched down beside the bed and slid under it, angling my head to peer beneath the bedboards. Sure enough, right in the center of the boards, affixed, was an aged yellow talisman. Bold characters in vermilion cinnabar spelled out my birth date and 8-character horoscope. I ripped the talisman off in one motion and crawled out from under the bed. The moment I looked up, the substitute corpse was lying on the bed, staring straight at me. That face was less than half a foot from mine, wearing a strange grin that stretched nearly to the ears. My hair stood on end, and the talisman in my hand nearly slipped to the floor. "Why you don't do anything foolish?" I shrank back, my voice trembling. "The blind old man is right in the yard." The proxy laughed 2 short, harsh, chilling chuckles. "You really think that old blind man came to save you?" He extended a finger and tapped the yellow talisman in my hand. "Did he tell you to tear this off and hide it in a gourd?" My heart jumped. Just now in the yard, the blind old man had indeed given such instructions, but the proxy had clearly not been there then. As if seeing through my doubt, the proxy continued in a sinister whisper. "He'll also want a lock of your hair, a drop of blood from your fingertip, and to stuff them into the gourd with that talisman." "How do you know that?" My throat felt dry. "Because that old bastard intends to use your life to buy himself long life." My hand trembled, and the yellow talisman drifted to the ground. The words "substitute corpse" stabbed into my heart like a knife. "You died long ago. You perished with your parents 4 years ago. Your grandfather used black magic, split half of the years of your life, and gave them to you. That's why this walking dead of yours has lived on these extra years." My head rang with a single, thunderous sound. Suddenly, I remembered what my grandfather's spirit had said earlier in the storm. Living people must not be drenched by this rain. At the time, I was puzzled. I was perfectly fine getting what didn't harm me. So why did my grandfather say that? But if I had already been dead, then my grandfather's words would have made sense. Yet the explanation about a substitute corpse was completely different from what the blind old man had told me. For the time being, I simply couldn't bring myself to believe him. I said, "And why on earth should I trust you?" The scapegoat showed his teeth in a grin. "Under the locust tree in your yard, your corpse is buried. Go dig it up and see for yourself whether I'm telling the truth." After he said that, his body suddenly melted like wax, turning into a pool of black water that flowed away along the crack in the wall. I was staring blankly when the door was flung open. The blind old man walked in and asked me, "Sammy, I've been calling you for ages. Why didn't you answer?" I hesitated for a moment, but still didn't mention the substitute corpse I had just seen. I only said I had been so absorbed in searching that I hadn't noticed. The blind old man nodded and asked if I had gotten the yellow talisman. I said I had it. The blind old man visibly grew noticeably more excited. His Adam's apple bobbed as he said, "Quick, take another strand of your hair and a drop of fingertip blood, and put them together with the talisman into this gourd." I couldn't help feeling a chill run down my spine. What the blind old man wanted me to do turned out to be exactly the same as what the scapegoat had said. Blind old man. I took a half step back and found an excuse. I suddenly remember my grandfather said that a lock of my baby hair and some umbilical cord blood are buried under the locust tree in the yard. Wouldn't using that be better? When the blind old man heard this, his face flushed with excitement. He tried hard to hide it, and clenching his hands, said, "Good, that will work even better. Quickly, let's go dig it up." I fetched a shovel, loosened the soil beneath the locust tree, and began swinging the blade to dig down. The heavy rain had made the earth wet and sticky. After only a few strokes, a small black coffin showed itself. I noticed the lid of the coffin was pasted with the same yellow talisman paper as the one under my bedboard. Written on it, unmistakably, were the details of my birth date and time, my 8 characters. I forced myself to suppress my terror and lifted the coffin lid. But when I saw the corpse inside, I couldn't hold back any longer. My legs went weak, and I collapsed onto the muddy ground. The body inside was a child, dressed in the blue cloth jacket I loved as a boy, face deathly pale, lips darkened to a bluish hue. What was most horrifying was that the flesh and skin of the corpse were not rotten at all. It looked as if it were simply sleeping. The old blind man sensed something was wrong. His nostrils flared as he sniffed. When he smelled the corpse inside the coffin, he shouted, "No, this isn't your baby hair and umbilical blood. Sammy, you lied to me." Seeing my own corpse with my own eyes hit me like a physical blow. I trembled all over. I had no strength to answer the blind man's accusation. If the body in the coffin was the dead me, then what did that make me now? Was I even still alive? My tears mixed with the rain as they ran down my face, and I demanded of the blind old man, "You told me my grandfather wanted to kill me, didn't you? If I were already dead, what would he still be killing?" The blind old man's face twitched. He had no reply. "I know, you all want my life." I wiped my face and suddenly laughed. True enough, I should have died with my parents 4 years ago. Having lived these extra years is enough. I can't let my grandfather be driven to pieces for my sake. The old blind man tried to argue, urging me to reconsider a few more words. But I said, "Old blind man, I know you want to take my life, but there's only one life to exchange. If a swap must be made, I will trade mine for my grandfather's." I stood up and shot off into the rain like a streak. Behind me, the old blind man stamped his feet in desperation. He realized I was heading for the coffin shop. "Sammy, you can't go. You've been tricked by that scapegoat. You going into that coffin won't bring your grandfather back at all. It'll just transfer all the energy on you to that sacrificial corpse. If he comes back to life, your whole village will die." But I could no longer hear anything. My whole mind was fixed on ending it all and saving my grandfather. I ran in the rain, and in no time at all I was back at the coffin shop's door. The shop's main door was still open, as if it had been waiting for me all along. I pushed it and stepped inside. But just as I reached out to push the door, a heart-rending shout came from behind me. "Sammy, don't go in." It was my grandfather's voice. I snapped around and, through the curtain of rain, saw a blurred silhouette drifting there. It was my grandfather's soul. His whole body was emitting blue smoke, as if something was burning him, yet he was still desperately floating toward me. "Inside that coffin, what's inside?" He hadn't finished speaking before his spirit grew even dimmer. I could barely make out the words that followed. My worry deepened. I must have lingered in the rain too long, further damaging my grandfather's soul. Just as the scapegoat had said, my grandfather never wanted me to trust anyone. He was afraid I'd learn the truth. Knew the secret that he died for me. But Grandpa, you're the only family I have left in this world. I, like now, adrift, neither fully alive nor dead. What meaning is there in living? I drew a deep breath and stepped into the coffin shop. That pitch-black coffin was still in its place. I gritted my teeth and crawled straight into the coffin. The moment I lay down, the coffin lid slammed shut with a bang. I heard the rain outside continuing, growing quieter and quieter, until it faded away. I felt calm in my heart. It seemed the rain had indeed finally stopped. The scapegoat hadn't lied to me. But at that moment, I felt as if my whole body were bound by invisible ropes, impossible to break free from no matter how I struggled. The wooden boards around me suddenly became transparent. Only then did I see clearly that I wasn't lying in a coffin at all, but in a pitch-black wooden box. The outside of the box was plastered with yellow talismans. Vermilion script covered the papers in dense, cramped incantations. Outside, I saw the blind old man and the substitute standing together. Their faces were unnaturally calm, their eyes fixed, staring straight at me. The blind old man said, "Master, this method is brilliant. Using his grandfather's soul to force him to lie down himself saves us the trouble." The scapegoat snorted. His grandfather defied heaven to change fate. That was against the cosmic order. Since we passed through this village and saw it, we can't let it go. Taking his grandson's soul will at least be acting on heaven's behalf. A cold shiver ran through me, and I finally understood. From beginning to end, it had all been an act by them. What sacrificial pawn, what strange rain, what grandfather's soul, it was all a lie. They just wanted me to climb into that box myself, willing to hand my soul over to them. Outside the box, the sacrificial pawn ignored my fury, took out a piece of red talisman paper, and stuck it to the lid. He was muttering to himself. My consciousness began to blur, my body growing lighter and lighter, as if I were about to float away. "Sammy!" Through the haze of awareness, I heard my grandfather screaming my name with a heart-wrenching cry. The blind old man sneered coldly. "Old thing, it's too late. Accept your fate. Your grandson shouldn't be alive in this world." "Sammy! Sammy!" My grandfather's voice grew more distant, and my vision darkened. "Grandpa!" The rain stopped. "It's time for me to go."